Little boy paid a Hell's Angel $2 to help him. What he asked left the biker shocked. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Jared Sullivan made his way through the sleepy town. His heavy leather boots echoed against the concrete, each step deliberate and measured. The familiar weight of his worn leather jacket settled comfortably on his broad shoulders, the patches and worn edges telling stories of countless miles on the open road. Steam rose from the paper cup of coffee in his weathered hands as he walked, the warmth seeping through his calloused fingers. The local coffee shop had become his regular stop, though the barista still trembled slightly whenever he ordered his usual black coffee. He didn't mind. He was used to the effect his appearance had on people. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Townspeople hurried past him on both sides of the street, some crossing to the other side when they spotted him coming. Mothers pulled their children closer, and shop owners watched him warily through their windows. The silver rings on his fingers caught the morning light as he lifted the cup to take a sip, his knuckles marked with old scars and faded tattoos. The small-town park ahead offered a quiet refuge. It was usually empty this early on a Sunday morning, just the way he liked it. The wooden bench near the old oak tree had become his unofficial spot over the past few weeks. Something about the peaceful setting helped quiet the ghosts that seemed to follow him wherever he went. Fallen leaves crunched under his boots as he made his way toward the bench. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from nearby chimneys. A few birds scattered from the path ahead of him, startled by his imposing presence. At 6'2" with broad shoulders and arms covered in tattoos, Jared knew he cut an intimidating figure. He noticed how the few other park visitors gave his favorite bench a wide berth. An elderly couple steered their morning walk to the opposite path, and a jogger altered her route to avoid passing near him. The isolation didn't bother him anymore. It was safer this way, keeping his distance from ordinary folks living their ordinary lives. The wooden bench creaked slightly as he lowered himself onto it. Jared took another long sip of his coffee, watching the steam swirl away in the cool morning air. His thoughts drifted, as they often did, to the life he'd left behind. The rumble of motorcycles, the brotherhood that had once meant everything, the choices that still haunted him. "Excuse me, mister?" The small voice pulled Jared from his thoughts. He turned his head to find a young boy standing nearby, no more than 6 years old, with bright blue eyes and tousled brown hair. The child wore a slightly too big jacket and scuffed sneakers, holding something in his small hands. Most children ran from Jared on sight. This one, however, looked straight at him without a trace of fear. There was something in those innocent eyes that made Jared's hardened exterior crack just slightly, a mix of hope and determination that seemed far too mature for such a young face. The boy stepped closer, extending his hands to reveal a crumpled $2 bill. The money looked worn, as if it had been carried around for some time, folded and unfolded many times over. "Please, mister," the boy said, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. "Can you help my mommy?" Jared stared at the offered money, then at the child's earnest face, completely caught off guard by both the approach and the request. For the first time in years, the tough biker found himself truly speechless. Jared shifted his weight uncomfortably, looking down at the small boy and his outstretched hand. The crumpled $2 bill trembled slightly in the child's grip. In all his years on the road, no one had ever approached him like this, especially not a kid. "Listen, buddy," Jared said, trying to keep his gruff voice gentle. "I don't think your mom would want you talking to strangers." The boy's determined expression didn't waver. "I'm Ethan," he said simply. "Now we're not strangers anymore." He pushed the money forward again. "Please, mister, I've been saving it." Jared ran a hand through his graying hair, glancing around the park. No angry parent seemed to be rushing over to snatch their child away from the scary biker. The boy, Ethan, stood alone, his blue eyes fixed on Jared with unwavering hope. "Your mom know you're out here?" Jared asked. Ethan shook his head. "She's sleeping. She sleeps a lot now." His small shoulders slumped slightly. "I heard her crying last night. She thinks I don't know, but I do." Something in Jared's chest tightened at the boy's words. He'd seen plenty of suffering in his life, caused more than his share of it too, but there was something about this kid's quiet desperation that got to him. "How long you been saving that money?" Jared asked, nodding at the worn bill. 3 weeks, Ethan said proudly. "I found some bottles to return, and Mrs. Peterson next door gave me $1 for helping with her flowers." He looked down at the money, then back up at Jared. "You look strong, like you could help fix things." Jared's coffee had gone cold in his hand. He set it down on the bench, studying the boy's earnest face. Every instinct told him to walk away. Getting involved with other people's problems never ended well. But something in those innocent blue eyes held him there. "Where's your house, kid?" Relief flooded Ethan's face. He grabbed Jared's large hand with his small one, surprising the older man with his boldness. "This way. It's not far." Jared allowed himself to be led through the quiet Sunday streets, aware of the startled looks from the few people they passed. The boy chatted as they walked, telling him about his mother's garden that needed weeding and the back steps that were broken. They moved away from the town center, past neat rows of houses with trimmed lawns, into an area where the homes grew more weathered and the yards less tended. Ethan's pace quickened as they approached a small white house set back from the road. The paint was peeling, and the front porch sagged slightly, but bright flowers still bloomed in careful rows along the walkway. Ethan stopped at the edge of the yard, pointing to a window with faded curtains drawn across it. "That's Mommy's room," he whispered, his voice dropping low. "She needs help, but she won't ask for it. She says we have to be strong, but—" He squeezed Jared's hand tighter. "Sometimes being strong means asking for help, right?" Jared stared at the house, feeling the weight of the boy's trust in his simple gesture. Without meaning to, he found himself following Ethan up the cracked concrete path toward the front door. Jared's weathered knuckles hesitated for a moment before rapping against the worn wooden door. The sound echoed through the quiet morning air. Behind him, Ethan bounced on his toes, still clutching the $2 bill in his small fist. The wait seemed endless. Finally, hinges creaked, and the door opened just enough to reveal a woman's face. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her brown hair hung limply around her shoulders. Despite her obvious exhaustion, there was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight tremor as she took in Jared's imposing figure. Her gaze flickered to his leather vest, the faded tattoos on his arms, then to her son standing behind him. "Ethan!" she gasped, opening the door wider. "What are you doing out here? Come inside right now!" The boy darted around Jared's legs but didn't go in. Instead, he grabbed his mother's hand. "Mommy, I found someone to help us! Look, I saved money and everything!" He thrust the crumpled bill toward her, color drained from Caroline's already pale face. "Oh, honey." She knelt down to Ethan's level, her movements careful and measured. "We don't need any help, and we certainly don't ask strangers for—" "Name's Jared," he cut in, his gruff voice gentler than his appearance suggested. "Your boy here found me in the park. Wouldn't take no for an answer." He tried to smile, though years of scowling made it feel foreign on his face. Caroline stood again, swaying slightly. "I'm so sorry he bothered you. Ethan knows better than to—" She pressed a hand against the doorframe to steady herself. "Ma'am," Jared said, "I ain't here to cause trouble. Your boy's got a good heart. He's worried about you, and from what I can see, he's got reason to be." "We're fine," Caroline insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "We don't need charity, especially not from—" She trailed off, but Jared knew what she meant. "Not from someone who looked like him. It ain't charity," he said firmly. "Just one person helping another. Sometimes that's all it needs to be." Something in his tone made her pause. She looked at him more closely, past the tattoos and the leather, seeing perhaps the sincerity in his eyes. "Mommy, please," Ethan pleaded, tugging at her hand. "He's nice, I can tell." Caroline's shoulders sagged slightly. I appreciate the offer, but—" Her words slurred at the edges, and she blinked rapidly, as if trying to clear her vision. "Ma'am?" Jared took a step forward, noticing how she swayed more pronouncedly now. "You all right?" "I'm fine, I just need to—" Caroline's eyes rolled back, and her knees buckled. Jared lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground. Her body felt frighteningly light in his arms. "Mommy!" Ethan cried out, his small hands clutching at her limp arm. "Caroline, can you hear me?" Jared patted her cheek gently, his heart hammering against his ribs. Her skin felt clammy under his rough fingers, and her breathing was shallow. "Caroline!" Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. Panic rose in Jared's chest as he held her unconscious form, feeling more helpless than he had in years. The tough exterior he'd built over decades crumbled in the face of this small family's crisis. Jared gently lowered Caroline to the floor, his heart racing as he pulled out his phone. His fingers, usually steady when working on engines or handling his motorcycle, trembled as he dialed 911. The operator's calm voice cut through his panic. 911, what's your emergency?" "I need an ambulance," Jared said, forcing his voice to stay level. "A woman just collapsed. She's breathing but unconscious." He rattled off the address, his eyes fixed on Caroline's pale face. Ethan knelt beside his mother, his small hand stroking her arm. "Mommy's always so tired," he whispered, his voice quivering. "She tries to hide it, but I can tell." Jared's chest tightened at the boy's words. He reached out and squeezed Ethan's shoulder, trying to offer comfort while keeping the phone pressed to his ear. The operator asked questions about Caroline's condition, and Jared answered as best he could, his free hand checking her pulse like the dispatcher instructed. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Red and white lights flashed through the windows, casting strange shadows across Caroline's still face. Jared had never felt more out of place. A tattooed biker kneeling in a stranger's living room, trying to help a woman he'd just met. The paramedics burst through the door with practiced efficiency, their movements quick and precise. They nudged Jared aside, their voices professional as they checked Caroline's vitals. Medical terms flew back and forth between them, most of which meant nothing to Jared. "Sir, are you family?" one of the paramedics asked, glancing at him. Before Jared could answer, Ethan grabbed his hand. "He's helping us," the boy said firmly. "Don't make him go away." The paramedic's expression softened as she looked at Ethan. "We need to take your mom to the hospital. Would you like to ride with her?" Ethan's grip on Jared's hand tightened. "Can Jared come too?" The paramedics exchanged looks, then nodded. "He can follow in his own vehicle." Minutes later, Jared found himself trailing the ambulance in his pickup truck, watching Ethan's small face in the back window of the emergency vehicle. The boy pressed his hand against the glass, and Jared raised his own in response, though he knew Ethan couldn't see him through the tinted windows. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Jared sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant and coffee, and the TV mounted on the wall played soundless news footage that nobody watched. Other people in the room cast wary glances his way. A tough-looking biker wasn't a common sight in these halls. Ethan hadn't let go of his hand since they arrived. The boy's fingers were wrapped around 3 of Jared's, holding on as if afraid he might disappear. They sat in silence, waiting for news about Caroline. Looking down at their joined hands, his large and scarred, Ethan's small and trusting, Jared felt something shift inside him. This morning, he'd been a loner, drifting through town with no connections, no responsibilities. Now, watching Ethan's brave face as they waited for word about his mother, Jared knew he couldn't walk away. He squeezed Ethan's hand gently, making a silent promise to stay, to see this through, whatever that might mean. The boy looked up at him with those trust-filled eyes, and Jared nodded, though neither of them spoke a word. The clock on the wall ticked steadily as they waited for the doctor to appear with news about Caroline's condition. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the waiting room as Jared and Ethan sat side by side. Hours had passed, marked only by the steady tick of the wall clock and the occasional squeak of nurses' shoes on the linoleum floor. Ethan had dozed off a few times, his head drooping against Jared's leather jacket before jerking awake again. A doctor in blue scrubs approached them, his face drawn and serious. Jared straightened in his chair, gently nudging Ethan. The boy blinked sleepily but became alert when he saw the doctor. "Are you here for Caroline Hayes?" the doctor asked, consulting his clipboard. Jared nodded, his throat tight. "Yes. How is she?" The doctor pulled up a chair and sat across from them, his movements deliberate. "I'm Dr. Matthews. Mrs. Hayes's condition is more serious than we initially thought." He paused, glancing at Ethan before continuing. "She's suffering from severe anemia and malnutrition. Her body isn't producing enough red blood cells, and she's been neglecting her own basic needs for some time now." Jared felt Ethan press closer to his side. The doctor's words hung heavy in the air. "There's also—" Dr. Matthews hesitated, lowering his voice. "We've found signs of an underlying condition that may require surgery. We need to run more tests to be certain, but the initial results are concerning." Jared's stomach knotted. He'd seen enough of life's harsh realities to know what was coming next. "The treatment she needs—" The doctor cleared his throat. "I have to be honest with you. Her insurance won't cover everything. The tests alone will be expensive, and if surgery becomes necessary—" He spread his hands. "We're looking at significant costs." The words hit Jared like a physical blow. He thought of the run-down house, of Caroline collapsing, of Ethan's $2 offered so hopefully. The pieces clicked into place. A single mother, too proud to ask for help, working herself to exhaustion while her health deteriorated. "Can I see my mommy?" Ethan's small voice broke through the heavy silence. "Doctor," Matthews smiled kindly. "Of course, she's sleeping now, but you can sit with her for a little while. A nurse will show you to her room." As they waited for the nurse, Ethan looked up at Jared, his blue eyes filled with a wisdom beyond his years. "Mommy needs help," he said softly, his fingers curled into the edge of Jared's jacket. "But she won't let anyone help." Something pulled in Jared's chest, an unfamiliar sensation, like a string being tugged deep inside him. He looked down at this small boy who had trusted him, a stranger, with his last $2 and his mother's well-being. The weight of that trust settled on his shoulders, heavy but somehow right. A nurse appeared, clipboard in hand. "You can see Mrs. Hayes now?" she said with a gentle smile. "This way, please." Jared stood, Ethan's hand still firmly in his. His mind raced with numbers, hospital bills, surgery costs, his own meager savings. He didn't know how, but he knew he had to do something. The boy's simple faith in him demanded nothing less. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Jared sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, his large frame making it creak with every movement. Beside him, Ethan had finally dozed off, his small body curled up against Jared's leather jacket. The boy's face was peaceful in sleep, though worry lines still creased his young forehead. Jared ran a rough hand over his face, his mind racing. Hospital corridors brought back memories he'd rather forget. Times when his brothers from the gang ended up here after fights or accidents. But this was different. This wasn't about patching up wounds from a brawl. This was about a mother fighting to survive for her son. He glanced down at Ethan and felt something stir in his chest. The kid had trusted him, a complete stranger, with everything he had, 2 crumpled dollars and hope for his mother's life. The weight of that trust sat heavy on Jared's shoulders. Through the window, he could see Caroline's room across the hall. She lay still, connected to machines that beeped steadily. She looked small and vulnerable in the hospital bed, nothing like the fierce, protective mother he'd glimpsed earlier. The sight made his throat tight. A nurse passed by, offering him a sympathetic smile. Jared nodded back, feeling out of place in his worn leather jacket and faded jeans. He'd never been good at this kind of thing. Hospitals, paperwork, insurance forms. His world was simpler. Ride hard, fight harder, survive. But something about Caroline's situation had awakened a part of him he thought was long dead. When Ethan stirred, mumbling in his sleep, Jared made a decision. He might not have much money, but he had strong hands and a stubborn will. He could at least make sure they had a clean house to return to. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, gently shaking Ethan's shoulder. "Let's get you home for a bit. Your mom needs rest and we can come back tomorrow." Ethan blinked sleepily but nodded, trusting Jared completely. They checked with the nurses, who promised to call if anything changed, and headed out to Jared's motorcycle. The boy's eyes lit up at the sight of it. The ride to Caroline's house was quiet, with Ethan holding tight to Jared's waist. When they arrived, the house looked even more run down in the fading light. Paint peeled from the walls, and the porch steps sagged dangerously. Inside, the kitchen told the story of Caroline's struggle. Dishes filled the sink, and dust covered the counters. Bills were stacked on the table, their red past due stamps visible even in the dim light. Jared rolled up his sleeves, revealing tattooed arms. "All right, kid, let's get this place cleaned up for your mom." Ethan watched in amazement as Jared attacked the mess with determination. He filled the sink with hot water and began scrubbing dishes, his large hands careful with the chipped plates. The boy helped by drying them, his small face serious with concentration. As they worked together, Jared felt a new purpose settling over him. This wasn't just about paying medical bills or fixing a broken house. This was about making sure a little boy didn't lose his mother, about keeping a family together. He looked at Ethan, carefully placing clean dishes in the cabinet, and understood that sometimes the toughest fights weren't won with fists at all. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Caroline's front yard as Jared's motorcycle rumbled to a stop. He'd been coming by every day for the past week, his tool belt slung over his shoulder, determination set in his weathered face. The house needed more work than he'd initially thought, but that didn't stop him. Today, he focused on the broken windows. The glass had cracks spreading like spider webs, letting in cold drafts that made the heating bills soar. Jared carefully measured and cut new panes, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate material. Each time he completed a repair, he felt a small sense of victory. "Can I help?" Ethan's voice piped up from behind him. The boy had taken to following Jared around like a shadow, watching his every move with curious eyes. "Sure, kid." Jared handed him a small brush. "You can help clean up the old putty while I get the new glass ready." They worked together in comfortable silence, broken only by Ethan's occasional questions about tools and techniques. When it was time for school, Jared wiped his hands clean and grabbed his keys. "Come on, buddy. Time to get you to class." The ride to school had become their morning routine. Ethan would wrap his small arms around Jared's waist, completely trusting, as they cruised through town. The other parents at drop-off still stared at the tattooed biker, but Jared didn't mind anymore. After school, they sat at Caroline's kitchen table, wrestling with math problems. 7 times 8, Jared prompted, pointing at the worksheet. Ethan's face scrunched up in concentration. 56? That's right. Jared ruffled the boy's hair, feeling a surge of pride. Between repair jobs and homework sessions, Jared made daily trips to the hospital. Sometimes memories would surface, of gang fights, of brothers lost to violence, but he pushed them away. This was different. This was about healing, not hurting. The nurses had grown used to his presence, no longer startling at his rough appearance. They updated him on Caroline's progress, noting small improvements day by day. Her color was returning, they said, and her vitals were getting stronger. Late one afternoon, after patching the last hole in the living room wall, Jared headed to the hospital for his usual visit. The setting sun painted the hospital windows orange as he walked down the familiar corridor to Caroline's room. He stopped in the doorway, surprised to find her awake. She looked pale and tired, but her eyes were alert as they met his. "You're still here," she said softly, her voice rough from disuse. Jared shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of the drywall dust on his clothes. "Yeah, well, somebody's got to keep an eye on things. The nurses told me you've been taking care of Ethan." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "And fixing the house. I don't know how to thank you." "Don't mention it." Jared rubbed the back of his neck, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Just doing what needs doing, that's all." "Still," Caroline insisted, her voice stronger now. "Thank you." Jared just nodded, moving to adjust her pillow so he wouldn't have to meet her eyes. He wasn't used to this, to being thanked, to being trusted. It made him feel both worthy and unworthy at the same time. The kitchen clock ticked past 9 as Jared stood at Caroline's sink, scrubbing dishes from the dinner he'd made for Ethan. Chicken soup? Nothing fancy, but the kid had asked for seconds. Through the window, crickets chirped in the darkness, a peaceful sound that still felt strange to his ears. He dried his hands on a worn dish towel and looked around the modest kitchen. Just last week, he would have been in some smoky bar, planning the next job with his brothers from the gang. The memories felt like scenes from someone else's life. The constant tension, the smell of leather and gasoline, the ever-present threat of violence. Now here he was, wearing an apron with flour on his sleeves, making sure a 6-year-old boy got his homework done and ate his vegetables. The thought almost made him laugh. Moving to the living room, Jared picked up his tool belt. The ceiling fan needed fixing. It made an annoying rattle that might keep Caroline awake when she came home. As he worked, muscle memory took over, his hands knowing exactly what to do. This kind of work felt honest, clean. No looking over his shoulder, no wondering if tonight would be the night everything went wrong. The fan fixed, Jared gathered the dirty laundry. He'd learned to separate colors from whites after a disastrous first attempt turned all of Ethan's school shirts pink. These simple tasks, cooking, cleaning, fixing things, gave him a strange sense of peace. It was so different from his old life, where each day brought new threats and challenges. The next afternoon, Jared visited Caroline in the hospital. She looked better, some color returning to her cheeks. She sat propped up against pillows, watching him as he arranged fresh flowers in a vase by her bed. "The doctors say I might be able to come home next week," she said softly. Jared nodded, settling into the chair beside her bed. That's good news. The house is ready for you. Caroline twisted the edge of her blanket between her fingers. I need to tell you something. She took a deep breath. About why things got so bad. Jared leaned forward, giving her his full attention. Caroline's eyes grew distant as she spoke. My husband, Tom, he was a police officer. Everyone in town knew him, respected him. He died trying to save a family from a house fire. Her voice cracked slightly. The insurance wasn't enough. There were medical bills from his last few days, the mortgage, Ethan's needs. Everything just kept piling up. She wiped at her eyes with trembling fingers. I thought I could handle it all myself. I was too proud to ask for help, even when things started falling apart. I didn't want anyone's pity. Jared listened silently, his chest tight with understanding. He knew about pride, about refusing help even when you were drowning. The worst part, Caroline continued, her voice barely above a whisper, is that I almost left Ethan without a mother because I couldn't admit I needed help. The weight of her words settled heavily in the room. Jared reached out, hesitating for a moment before placing his hand over hers. Her fingers were cold and thin, but they gripped his with surprising strength. You're not alone anymore, he said simply, meaning every word. The afternoon sun warmed the driveway as Jared knelt beside his motorcycle, teaching Ethan about basic maintenance. The boy sat cross-legged on the concrete, hanging on every word. Now, see this part here? Jared pointed to the air filter. It's like the bike's lungs. Gotta keep it clean so she can breathe right. Ethan nodded seriously, his blue eyes wide with fascination. Just like people need clean air? Exactly right, buddy. Jared couldn't help but smile at the kid's quick understanding. He handed Ethan a clean rag. Want to help me polish her up? Yeah! Ethan grabbed the cloth and started wiping the chrome with careful determination. His tongue stuck out slightly as he concentrated on getting every spot perfect. These quiet moments had become precious to Jared. Each day brought new discoveries, like how Ethan loved peanut butter and banana sandwiches cut into triangles, or how he could name every dinosaur in his picture books. Later that week, they spent an afternoon in the backyard. Jared had found an old baseball and mitt in the garage, probably belonging to Ethan's father. After dusting them off, he called Ethan outside. Ever play catch before? Jared asked, tossing the ball gently in his hand. Ethan shook his head. Daddy was going to teach me, but... His voice trailed off. Well, it's pretty simple. Jared demonstrated how to hold the mitt, kneeling down to help position Ethan's small hand correctly. Keep your eye on the ball, and don't be scared of it. Their first throws were awkward, with more balls hitting the ground than finding their target. But Ethan's determination never wavered. By sunset, he was catching more than he missed, his face lighting up with pride each time the ball landed in his mitt. Did you see that? Ethan would shout after each successful catch. I did it, Jared! These moments stirred something deep in Jared's chest, a feeling of purpose he'd never known before. He found himself looking forward to their time together, planning little projects they could do around the house. One evening, after they'd finished dinner, mac and cheese with hot dogs cut up in it, Ethan's favorite, they sat at the kitchen table. Ethan was coloring while Jared cleaned up, the kitchen quiet except for the sound of crayon on paper and dishes being washed. Jared? Ethan's voice was small but clear. Yeah, buddy? Are you going to be my new daddy? Jared's hands froze in the soapy water. The question hung in the air like a delicate bubble, beautiful but fragile. He turned slowly, finding Ethan looking at him with those honest, hopeful eyes. The crayon in the boy's hand had stopped mid-stroke on his drawing, waiting for an answer. Jared's throat felt tight. His heart thumped heavily in his chest as he struggled with the weight of those simple words. How could he explain the complications, the dangers of his past, to this innocent child who saw him only as a protector? He stood there, water dripping from his hands, caught between the warmth that flooded his heart and the fear that gripped it. The waiting room at the medical clinic had become all too familiar to Jared over the past few weeks. He sat in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs, thumbing through an outdated magazine while Caroline met with her doctor. His leather jacket felt out of place among the sterile white walls and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. "Mr. Sullivan?" the nurse called from the doorway. "Ms. Hayes would like you to join them." Jared followed the nurse down the hallway, his heavy boots echoing against the linoleum floor. Inside the examination room, Caroline sat on the edge of the bed, her face showing signs of improvement but still carrying the shadows of exhaustion. "The treatment is working," the doctor explained, showing them charts that meant little to Jared. "But recovery will take time. Ms. Hayes needs continued support and rest." Caroline's eyes met Jared's briefly before looking away. "I can manage," she said softly, but her voice lacked conviction. Later that day, Jared worked on fixing the loose boards on the front porch steps. The rhythmic sound of his hammer filled the afternoon air. Caroline watched from the kitchen window, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "You don't have to do all this," she said when she finally came outside, settling into the old rocking chair. Jared wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. "I know," he replied simply, continuing his work. "Why are you?" Her question hung between them, heavy with unspoken doubts. He paused, considering his words carefully. "Sometimes people just need help. Doesn't have to be complicated." Caroline studied him, her expression a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "People like you. I mean, with your background. They usually want something in return. I'm not that person anymore." Jared's voice was quiet but firm. The days fell into a routine. Mornings meant getting Ethan ready for school, afternoons were filled with house repairs and doctor appointments, and evenings brought quiet moments of shared meals and conversation. Carolyn's guard began to lower, inch by inch, like a drawbridge being slowly lowered over a moat of past hurts and fears. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jared sat on the newly repaired porch steps. The street was quiet, with only the occasional car passing by. He watched as the streetlights flickered to life one by one. The rumble of a motorcycle broke the peace. The sound was familiar. Too familiar. A black Harley pulled up to the curb, its rider's face hidden behind a helmet adorned with a wolf's head design. Jared's muscles tensed as the rider cut the engine and dismounted. "Well, well," the man said, removing his helmet to reveal a weathered face Jared hadn't seen in months. "Look what domestic life has done to the mighty Jax Sullivan. What do you want, Marcus?" Jared's voice was low, controlled. Marcus leaned against his bike, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "The wolf sent me. We've got one last job lined up. Big score, easy in and out. He specifically asked for you." Jared's jaw tightened. "I'm done with that life." "Nobody's ever really done, Jax. You know that." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Just hear me out. The wolf says this could set you up for life. No more fixing porches for charity cases." The envelope landed at Jared's feet, a white rectangle against the darkening wood of the porch steps. Behind him, through the window, he could hear the muffled sounds of Caroline helping Ethan with his homework, their voices carrying the warmth of home, a warmth that now felt threatened by the shadows of his past. Jared stared at the envelope on the porch step, his heart pounding against his chest. The street lamp cast long shadows across the weathered wood, making the white envelope seem to glow in the growing darkness. "Pick it up," Marcus said, his voice carrying a hint of threat. The wolf doesn't like to be kept waiting. The screen door creaked behind them. Jared? Caroline's voice was soft, uncertain. Is everything okay out here? Marcus's lips curled into a smile. Well, isn't this cozy? He turned toward Caroline, tipping an imaginary hat. Ma'am. Go back inside, Jared said, his voice firm but gentle. Everything's fine. Caroline hesitated for a moment before closing the door. Through the window, Jared could see her lingering, worry etched on her face. Cute family you've got here, Marcus said, his tone making Jared's skin crawl. Be a shame if something happened to them. Jared's fists clenched at his sides. That a threat? Just stating facts. Marcus kicked the envelope closer to Jared's feet. The wolf wants you for this job. Says you're the only one who can handle it right. Inside that envelope is your cut, just for showing up to hear the details. I told you I'm done. Marcus laughed, a harsh sound in the quiet evening. Nobody's done until the wolf says they're done. You know how this works, Jax. You're either with us, or... He let the sentence hang in the air. The sound of a car passing by made them both turn. A neighbor walked their dog on the opposite sidewalk, giving them a suspicious look. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, the old warehouse on Miller Street. Marcus swung his leg over his bike. Don't make me come back here. Wouldn't want to disturb your domestic bliss. The motorcycle roared to life, and Marcus disappeared into the night, leaving behind only the envelope and the heavy weight of dread in Jared's stomach. Inside the house, Caroline stood in the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes that were already clean. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the sink. Who was that? She asked, not turning around. Nobody, Jared replied, his voice rough. Just someone from my past. Are we in danger? Her question was direct, cutting through the pretense. Jared walked to the window, watching the street outside. No, he lied. Everything's fine. He climbed the stairs slowly, his boots heavy on each step. At the top, he paused outside Ethan's room. The boy sat cross-legged on his bed, bathed in the blue light of the television. Some cartoon played quietly, but Ethan wasn't really watching it. His eyes were fixed on the door, on Jared. Hey, buddy, Jared said, forcing a smile. Was that a bad man? Ethan asked, his voice small but steady. Jared's chest tightened. Just someone I used to know. Nothing to worry about. He walked to his own room, closing the door behind him. The envelope felt like it was burning a hole in his jacket pocket. He knew what he'd find inside. Enough money to tempt him, to make him consider the wolf's offer. But he also knew what accepting it would mean. Sitting on the edge of his bed, Jared pulled out the envelope. The thickness of it told him there was at least a few $1,000s inside. Seed money, they used to call it. Just enough to hook you back in. Through the thin walls, he could hear Caroline moving around downstairs, the quiet sounds of her getting ready for bed. The TV in Ethan's room still hummed softly. These simple, domestic sounds, so different from the roar of motorcycles and the chaos of his old life, had become precious to him. Morning light filtered through the kitchen window as Jared sat at the small table, his coffee growing cold. Caroline moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing Ethan's lunch for school. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. We need to talk, Jared said finally, his voice rough. After Ethan leaves for school. Caroline's hand stilled for a moment as she packed Ethan's sandwich. About last night? Yeah. Ethan bounded down the stairs, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Ready. Caroline forced a smile. Have a good day, sweetheart. She kissed the top of his head. Bye, Mom. Bye, Jared. Ethan waved as he headed for the door where the school bus waited. The silence that followed his departure was deafening. Carolyn sat down across from Jared, her hands wrapped around her own coffee mug. "Tell me." Jared took a deep breath. "Before I came here, I was part of a motorcycle gang. Not just any gang, one of the most dangerous in the state. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We did things. Bad things." Caroline's knuckles went white around her mug. "What kind of things?" "The kind that land people in prison." Jared couldn't meet her eyes. "I left that life behind. Or I thought I did. But last night they came to bring me back. There's a job they want me to do. And if you refuse, they'll come after me." Jared's voice was barely above a whisper. "And anyone close to me." Caroline pushed back from the table, her chair scraping against the floor. "So you're telling me that my son, my 6-year-old boy, is in danger because of you?" "I would never let anything happen to Ethan," Jared said firmly. "Or you. But you can't guarantee that, can you?" Caroline's voice cracked. "My husband was a police officer. He died trying to protect people from men like the ones you used to run with. And now you're telling me those same kind of people might come after us?" The mention of her husband hit Jared like a physical blow. "Caroline, No." She held up her hand. "I trusted you. I let you into our lives. Ethan," her voice broke. "Ethan looks at you like you're his father. I care about him. About both of you. If you really care about us, you can't be involved in that world." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "I won't put Ethan through that. I won't let him lose another father figure to violence." Jared stood slowly, his chair groaning against the floor. "I understand." "Do you?" Caroline wrapped her arms around herself. "Because this isn't just about you anymore. Every choice you make affects us now. And I can't—" She took a shaky breath. "I can't have someone in our lives who might bring danger to our door." The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. She was right. Of course she was right. He'd been fooling himself, thinking he could have this normal life, this family. "I'll go," he said quietly. "You won't have to worry about me bringing trouble to your door anymore." He walked to the front door, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind him, he could hear Caroline's muffled sobs. His hand rested on the doorknob, and for a moment, he wanted nothing more than to turn back, to promise her everything would be okay. But he couldn't make that promise. Not with his past lurking in the shadows, waiting to drag him, and them, down into darkness. The clock on Jared's bedside table blinked 2:37 a.m. as he stuffed the last of his clothes into his weathered duffel bag. His movements were careful, deliberate, trying not to make a sound in the quiet house. Moonlight filtered through the guest room window, casting long shadows across the floor. He'd grown fond of this room over the past few weeks. The crooked picture frame on the wall that he'd straightened a dozen times. The squeaky floorboard by the door that he'd meant to fix. Small things that had made this place feel like home. Slinging the bag over his shoulder, Jared crept down the hallway. He paused at Ethan's door, which was slightly ajar. The boy's nightlight cast a soft glow across his sleeping face. Toy cars were scattered across the floor. They'd been playing with them just yesterday afternoon. Ethan had been so excited to show Jared his collection, naming each one with pride. Jared's throat tightened. He wanted to go in, to say goodbye properly, but he knew he couldn't. Ethan wouldn't understand. He'd ask questions Jared couldn't answer, make promises Jared couldn't keep. In the kitchen, Jared pulled out a piece of paper and pen. His large hands, more used to working on engines than writing letters, gripped the pen awkwardly. What could he possibly say? How could he explain his departure without revealing the danger he was protecting them from? After several false starts, he kept it simple. "Caroline, I'm sorry. You're right. You and Ethan deserve better than what I can give you. Thank you for letting me be part of your lives, even for a little while. Please tell Ethan. Tell him I'm sorry too." He placed the note on the kitchen counter where Caroline would find it in the morning. His boots felt heavy as he walked to the front door. The house creaked softly, familiar sounds he'd grown accustomed to during his time here. The loose doorknob he'd fixed. The dent in the wall he'd patched. Every repair a memory he'd have to leave behind. As he stepped out into the cool night air, Jared took one last look at the house. The porch light cast a warm glow on the steps, where he and Ethan had sat sharing ice cream just days ago. The flower bed where Caroline had started planting new bulbs as her strength returned. Small pieces of a life he'd dared to dream might be his. He walked to his motorcycle, parked at the curb. The engine's rumble seemed too loud in the quiet neighborhood, but he had to go now, before his resolve crumbled. Hours later, as dawn broke over the horizon, Caroline woke to an unusually quiet house. She knew something was wrong before she even left her bedroom. The absence felt tangible, like all the warmth had been sucked out of the air. In the kitchen, the note waited on the counter. Her hands trembled as she read it, the words blurring through her tears. It was so short, so final. No explanation, no real goodbye. "Mommy?" Ethan's voice came from behind her. "Where's Jared?" Caroline quickly wiped her eyes before turning to face her son. He stood in his pajamas, clutching his favorite stuffed bear, his eyes already filling with confusion and hurt as he looked around the empty kitchen. "Jared had to go away, sweetheart," she managed to say. But he was going to help me build my new model car today." Ethan's lower lip trembled. "He promised." Carolyn knelt down and pulled her son close as the first sob shook his small body. She had no answers for him, no way to explain why another person he loved had disappeared from his life. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the empty chair where Jared used to sit. Carolyn stood at the sink, mechanically washing dishes from a breakfast neither she nor Ethan had really eaten. 3 days had passed since Jared's departure, but his absence felt like a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. The house seemed to miss him, too. The dripping faucet he'd been meaning to fix tapped out a steady rhythm. The loose floorboard in the hallway creaked more often now, as if calling out for his attention. Even the old furnace groaned louder, protesting the loss of its caretaker. "Mommy?" Ethan's small voice came from the doorway. "Can we wait for Jared on the porch? Maybe he'll come back today." Caroline's hands stilled in the soapy water. Her heart ached at the hope in her son's voice. "Not today, sweetie. You need to get ready for school." "But what if he comes while I'm gone?" She dried her hands and turned to face her son. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He hadn't been sleeping well. Neither had she. "Ethan, he didn't even say goodbye." Ethan's lower lip trembled. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, baby." Caroline knelt down, ignoring the wave of dizziness that swept over her. "You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices." "Like Daddy did?" The innocent question hit her like a physical blow. Caroline pulled Ethan close, feeling his small arms wrap around her neck. "This is different," she whispered, though she wasn't sure how to explain why. Later that morning, after dropping Ethan at school, Carolyn felt the familiar weakness creeping back into her bones. She'd been pushing herself too hard, trying to maintain the routines Jared had established. The doctors had warned her about overexertion, but what choice did she have? The house wouldn't clean itself, and Ethan needed her. She sank onto the couch, her breath coming in short gasps. The room spun slightly, and she closed her eyes. Just a short rest, she told herself. Just 5 minutes. The phone's sharp ring startled her awake. Caroline fumbled for the receiver, her heart jumping when she saw the unknown number. Hello? Caroline? Jared's deep voice sent a jolt through her system. Jared? She sat up straight, her free hand gripping the armrest. Where are you? I can't say exactly. Somewhere safe. His voice was tired, strained. I needed to let you know I'm okay. Caroline's relief warred with anger and hurt. Ethan misses you terribly. He thinks he did something wrong. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. Tell him it's not his fault. None of this is his fault. Then come back, Caroline pleaded, her voice breaking. Whatever's wrong, we can figure it out together. We need you, Jared. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. I want to, he finally said, his voice rough. God, Caroline, you don't know how much I want to. But I have to handle some things first. Make sure it's safe. Safe from what? She asked, but she already knew he wouldn't answer. I have to go, he said. Just take care of yourself and Ethan, please. Jared, wait. Caroline gripped the phone tighter. Whatever you're dealing with, whenever you're ready, there's a place for you here. But you have to choose it. You have to want it enough to fight for it. Jared sat in his dingy motel room, staring at the phone he'd just hung up. Caroline's words echoed in his mind. You have to want it enough to fight for it. His calloused hands trembled as he ran them through his graying hair. The crack in her voice, the pain he'd heard, it was almost more than he could bear. The room felt suffocating, its yellowed wallpaper and stained carpet a far cry from the warm home he'd left behind. He'd been here 3 days, but it felt like weeks. Every morning he woke up reaching for his tools, ready to fix something in Caroline's house. Every evening, he caught himself wondering if Ethan had finished his homework. Standing up, Jared paced the narrow space between the bed and the door. His reflection in the mirror stopped him short. The harsh fluorescent light made the lines in his face deeper, his eyes darker. Was this what Caroline and Ethan saw when they looked at him? A worn-out biker trying to play house? You don't deserve them, he muttered to his reflection. The words tasted bitter, but familiar. He'd been telling himself that since the day Ethan approached him with those $2. Outside, a motorcycle roared past, and Jared's muscles tensed automatically. Every passing bike could be Rick or one of his crew. The gang had eyes everywhere in these small towns. They were probably watching him right now, waiting to see if he'd crack under the pressure. Jared pulled out his wallet, fishing behind the crumpled bills until he found what he was looking for, a small photo booth strip. He and Ethan had taken it at the mall last month, when they'd gone shopping for school supplies. The boy's grin was wide and genuine, while Jared looked awkward but happy. Real happiness, not the artificial high of his old life. His phone buzzed, a text from Rick. Time's running out. Brother, decision time. The words made his stomach turn. Rick knew exactly what buttons to push, exactly how to make him feel trapped. But for the first time, Jared felt something else besides fear or resignation. He felt anger. Who was Rick to take this away from him? Who was he to threaten the peace Jared had found? The life he could have? Jared grabbed his leather jacket and keys. The familiar weight of the leather settled on his shoulders as he stepped out into the cool night air. His motorcycle waited in the parking lot, chrome gleaming under the streetlights. As he swung his leg over the seat, he felt the pull of 2 worlds, the peaceful life he'd glimpsed with Caroline and Ethan, and the dangerous familiarity of his past. The ride to the gang's hideout took 20 minutes. Each mile brought back memories, deals gone wrong, fights, betrayals. But now they felt hollow, like watching someone else's life play out. The old warehouse came into view, its broken windows and graffiti-covered walls a testament to years of neglect. Jared parked his bike and walked toward the entrance. Music thumped from inside, and the smell of cigarettes and cheap beer wafted through the cracks in the door. His hand hesitated on the handle. This place had been his home once. These people, his family. Now it felt like walking into a trap. As he pulled the door open, the familiar atmosphere hit him like a physical force. The smoky air, the wary glances, the underlying current of violence waiting to explode. His body remembered this dance, even if his heart was elsewhere. The door creaked shut behind him, and Jared felt the weight of his old life settling back onto his shoulders. Jared stood in the dimly lit warehouse, lit, the smell of stale beer and cigarettes hanging thick in the air. His fingers traced the edges of a worn envelope in his jacket pocket, mail forwarded from his old address. The sight of Ethan's messy handwriting on the front had made his heart skip a beat. Finding a quiet corner away from the rowdy crowd, he pulled out the letter. The paper was decorated with crayon drawings, stick figures of what appeared to be him, Caroline, and Ethan holding hands in front of their house. His rough fingers trembled as he unfolded it. "Dear Jared," the letter began in wobbly letters, clearly written with great care. "I miss you lots. The house is quiet without you. Mommy tries to fix things, but she's not as good as you. Yesterday, the sink was dripping, and she couldn't make it stop." Jared's throat tightened. He could picture Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, tongue stuck out in concentration as he wrote each word. "My friend Tommy asked why I was sad. I told him my daddy left. But then I remembered you're not really my daddy. But Mommy says that's not true. She says being a daddy isn't about who made you. It's about who loves you and takes care of you." The words blurred as Jared blinked back tears. Around him, the warehouse pulsed with music and voices, but he was lost in Ethan's simple wisdom. "Mommy says you're my daddy now. She said it when she thought I was sleeping, but I heard her. She misses you too. She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking." A lump formed in Jared's throat. The image of Caroline crying alone hit him like a physical blow. He remembered how strong she tried to be, even when she was at her weakest. "Please come home. I saved $2 more. You can have them if you want. Love, Ethan. P.S. Mommy helped me spell the hard words." Jared folded the letter carefully, his hands shaking. The noise of the warehouse seemed distant now, meaningless compared to the weight of Ethan's words. He thought about the family he'd left behind, about the life he'd started to build. Looking around the warehouse, he saw his past for what it truly was, a prison of his own making. The faces of his old gang members, once familiar as family, now seemed like strangers. This wasn't his home anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. He stood up, his decision made. Rick emerged from the shadows, a knowing smirk on his face. "Going somewhere, brother?" Jared met his gaze steadily. "I'm done, Rick. Find someone else for your job." Without waiting for a response, he walked toward the exit. Behind him, he could hear Rick calling out threats, but they held no power over him anymore. His real family was waiting for him. Back in his motel room, Jared gathered his few belongings quickly. He packed his duffel bag with mechanical efficiency, his mind already on the road ahead. The letter from Ethan lay carefully folded in his breast pocket, close to his heart. As he strapped his bag to his motorcycle, the first rays of dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges. The morning air was crisp and clean, full of promise. Jared kicked his bike to life, its familiar rumble matching the determination in his chest. It was time to go home. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the front yard as Jared parked his motorcycle at the curb. His boots crunched on the gravel driveway, each step echoing the thundering of his heart. The house looked different somehow, smaller, more vulnerable than he remembered. The window he'd fixed still held strong, but the paint was peeling in new places. His hand trembled as he raised it to knock. Before his knuckles could touch the wood, the door opened. Carolyn stood there, her eyes wide with surprise. She looked thinner than when he'd left, but there was more color in her cheeks. She wore one of her old flowered dresses, the one she'd been wearing the day he first arrived. Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and lingering hurt. Finally, Caroline stepped aside, a silent invitation that meant more than any words could convey. Jared ducked his head and stepped inside, the familiar scent of home washing over him. The living room was neat, but showed signs of neglect. A pile of bills sat unopened on the coffee table. The dripping sink he'd meant to fix echoed from the kitchen. His tools still hung on their hooks by the back door, untouched since he'd left. "Ethan's at school," Caroline said softly, breaking the silence. "He'll be home soon." She wrung her hands together, a nervous gesture he remembered well. "Would you like some coffee?" Jared nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He followed her to the kitchen, watching as she moved through the familiar routine of making coffee. Her hands shook slightly as she measured the grounds. "I got his letter," Jared said finally, his voice rough. He pulled the creased paper from his jacket pocket. "About being his daddy." Carolyn's back stiffened, but she didn't turn around. "He misses you. We both do." The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the kitchen with its comforting aroma. "But Jared, I need to know. Is it over? Really over?" He stepped closer, close enough to see the tension in her shoulders. "Yes," he said firmly. "I walked away from all of it, for good this time." He paused, gathering his courage. "If you'll have me, I want to come home. To you and Ethan." Caroline turned then, tears glistening in her eyes. "We're not exactly the perfect family," she whispered. "Perfect's overrated," Jared replied, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I just want to be here, to help fix things. Not just the house, but—" He gestured vaguely between them. The sound of running feet on the porch interrupted them. The door burst open, and Ethan stood there, backpack hanging from one shoulder, eyes wide with disbelief. "You came back!" he cried, launching himself at Jared. Jared caught him, lifting him easily. The boy's arms wrapped tight around his neck, and Jared felt wetness against his shoulder. "I got your letter, buddy," he murmured into Ethan's hair. "Are you staying?" Ethan's voice was muffled against his jacket. "For real this time?" Jared looked over at Caroline, who was watching them with tears streaming down her face. She nodded slightly, and something in Jared's chest loosened. They moved to the living room, Ethan refusing to let go of Jared's hand. As they sat together on the worn couch, Jared felt the familiar weight of his past pressing down on him. But now, with Ethan's small hand in his, and Caroline's gentle presence beside him, that weight seemed lighter somehow, more manageable. Together, they could rebuild what was broken, not just the creaking floorboards and dripping faucets, but the trust and love that had started to grow between them. The local garage smelled of motor oil and rubber, a scent Jared had grown to love over the past few weeks. His calloused hands worked steadily on an old Chevy's engine, the familiar work bringing him peace. The owner, Mike, had taken a chance on him despite his rough appearance, and Jared was determined to prove himself worthy of that trust. "Hey, Sullivan," Mike called from across the garage. "Mrs. Peterson's here for her car." Jared wiped his hands on a shop rag and headed to the front. Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman with kind eyes, smiled when she saw him. Gone were the days when people crossed the street to avoid him. Now they sought him out, trusting him with their vehicles and greeting him by name. After work, Jared drove home. Home, a word that still felt new on his tongue. The small house looked better these days. Fresh paint covered the walls, and the yard was neat and trim. Through the window, he could see Ethan doing homework at the kitchen table. Caroline was stirring something on the stove when he walked in. The kitchen smelled like garlic and tomatoes, and his stomach growled appreciatively. She looked healthier now, her cheeks fuller, her eyes brighter. The regular doctor visits and proper medication were working wonders. "How was work?" she asked, stirring the pot of sauce. "Good. Fixed Mrs. Peterson's transmission today." He washed his hands at the sink, the grease slowly giving way to soap and water. "How about you? How was the doctor's appointment?" "Dr. Marshall says my blood work is improving." Caroline's smile was genuine, reaching her eyes. "The new medication is helping." Ethan looked up from his homework. "Can Jared help me with my math after dinner?" "Sure, buddy," Jared replied, ruffling the boy's hair as he passed. They ate dinner together, talking about their day. It was simple, domestic, and perfect in its ordinariness. After helping Ethan with his homework and tucking him into bed, Jared and Caroline sat on the back porch. The evening air was cool, and crickets chirped in the darkness. "I never thought I'd have this," Caroline admitted softly, wrapping her arms around herself. "After Tom died, I thought that was it. Just me and Ethan against the world." Jared nodded, understanding completely. "When I was with the gang, I couldn't imagine any other life. Didn't think I deserved one." He paused, looking out into the darkness. "But now," Caroline prompted, turning to face him. "Now I wake up every morning grateful. For this job. This house." He looked at her, his eyes sincere. "For you and Ethan." Caroline reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm against his, and she didn't flinch at the roughness of his calluses. "We're grateful for you too, Jared. What you've done for us." "You gave me a chance," he said simply, "when most people wouldn't have." They sat in comfortable silence, their joined hands a bridge between their past lives and this new beginning. The porch swing creaked gently as they rocked, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. It wasn't perfect. They both carried scars from their pasts, but it was real and honest and theirs. Carolyn leaned her head against his shoulder, and Jared felt something in his chest expand. This quiet moment, this simple connection, meant more than all the wild freedom he'd chased in his gang days. Here, on this worn porch swing, with Carolyn's trust and Ethan's love, he'd found something he never knew he was looking for. The morning sun streamed through the newly cleaned windows, casting warm light across the kitchen table where blueprints and renovation plans lay scattered. Jared traced his finger along a sketch of the house's layout, while Caroline made notes in her neat handwriting. "If we fix the back porch first," Jared explained, "we can make it safe for Ethan to play out there. Then we'll tackle the bathroom plumbing." Caroline nodded, her hair falling forward as she leaned over the plans. "The estimate from the hardware store seems reasonable. I can pick up extra shifts at—" "No," Jared said firmly but gently. "The doctor said you need to take it easy. I've got this covered." He tapped the paycheck from the garage sitting on the counter. "Mike gave me a raise last week." The sound of sneakers thundering down the stairs announced Ethan's arrival. Jared, can you help me with my science project?" The slip made both adults pause, but Jared recovered quickly. "Sure, buddy. What are we building?" "A volcano!" Ethan's eyes sparkled with excitement. Mrs. Thompson says we can make it erupt and everything. Caroline watched as Jared and Ethan gathered supplies, spreading newspaper across the kitchen floor. Her son's face glowed with happiness as Jared helped him mix baking soda and vinegar, explaining the chemical reaction in simple terms. The sight made her heart swell. Later that afternoon, while Ethan was at soccer practice, Jared and Caroline worked together in the yard. He showed her how to use the power drill, his hands steady as he guided hers on the tool. The closeness made her breath catch, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was something else entirely. "You're a natural," he praised as she successfully mounted a bracket for the new porch railing. "I had a good teacher," she replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "You know, Jared, I never thought—" He paused in his work, giving her his full attention. "Never thought what?" Caroline set down the drill, turning to face him fully. "I never thought I could trust anyone again after Tom died, especially not someone who—" She gestured vaguely at his tattoos. "Who seemed so different from our world." Jared's shoulders tensed slightly, but he remained quiet, letting her continue. "But you've shown me that people can change, that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places." Her voice grew softer. "I'm falling in love with you, Jared. Not because you're trying to be someone else, but because of who you've become. This man who fixes our house, who helps my son with his homework, who makes sure I take my medicine." The confession hung in the air between them, as real and solid as the porch they were rebuilding. Before Jared could respond, they heard Ethan's voice calling from the front yard. "Dad, we won our practice game." Ethan ran around the corner, still in his soccer uniform, clutching a water bottle. This time, neither adult corrected his choice of words. Jared caught the boy in a hug, pride evident on his face. "That's great, buddy. Tell us all about it." As Ethan launched into an animated play-by-play of his soccer victory, Carolyn watched them together, her son and the man who had walked into their lives on a quiet Sunday morning, carrying all their hopes in a crumpled $2 bill. The three of them, standing in their half-finished backyard, felt more like family than she'd ever dared to dream possible. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the kitchen window as Jared sat at the table, surrounded by paperwork. Bank statements, mortgage documents, and insurance forms covered every inch of the wooden surface. His calloused fingers, more used to gripping wrenches than pens, carefully filled out application after application. Mike, his boss at the garage, had offered him a partnership deal. The opportunity would mean more stability, better benefits, and a chance to provide the kind of life Caroline and Ethan deserved. Jared's chest tightened as he thought about the boy who now called him Dad without hesitation. He heard Caroline's footsteps before she entered the kitchen. "What's all this?" she asked, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Just some paperwork for the garage," Jared explained, leaning back in his chair. "Mike wants to make me a partner." He watched her face carefully, seeking her reaction. Carolyn's eyes widened. "Jared, that's wonderful." She pulled out a chair and sat beside him, examining the documents with interest. "There's more," he continued, pulling out a small notebook from his jacket pocket. Inside were calculations, savings plans, and notes about school districts. "I've been thinking about our future, Ethan's future." Caroline's expression softened as she watched him flip through the pages. This was a different man from the intimidating biker who had shown up at her door months ago. This was someone who stayed up late planning college funds and researching health insurance options. "You don't have to do all this alone," she said softly. "I want to," Jared replied, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to do right by both of you." He closed the notebook and turned to face her fully. "Caroline, I've been thinking about something else too." She waited, patient and attentive, as he gathered his thoughts. I know I'm not the kind of man you probably imagined ending up with, he began, his hands fidgeting with the edge of a document. My past isn't pretty, and I can't change that. But being here, with you and Ethan, it's changed me, made me want to be better. Caroline reached out and took his hand, her touch steady and reassuring. I want to make this official, Jared continued. Not just living here and helping out, but really being a family. I want to marry you, Caroline. Not just for Ethan's sake, but because I love you. Because somehow you and that amazing kid of yours have become my whole world. His voice cracked slightly on the last words, and he pulled a small ring from his pocket. It wasn't fancy, a simple silver band with a modest diamond, but it represented everything he wanted to give them. Stability, commitment, love. Caroline's eyes welled with tears as she looked at the ring. You really want this? A ready-made family with all our complications? I want everything that comes with being your husband and Ethan's dad, Jared answered firmly. The good days and the hard ones, all of it. Through her tears, Caroline smiled. Then yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. Jared slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. It fit perfectly, just like he now fit perfectly into their lives. Together, they began discussing their future, wedding plans, house renovations, and dreams for their family. The evening settled softly around their small house, bringing with it a gentle peace that Jared had never known in his previous life. He sat on the worn couch, Caroline curled against his side, both of them watching Ethan sprawled on the carpet with his homework. The silver ring on Caroline's finger caught the lamplight, sending tiny sparkles dancing across the ceiling. Need any help there, buddy? Jared asked, noticing Ethan's furrowed brow as he worked on his math problems. I think I got it, Ethan replied, his tongue poking out in concentration. You showed me the trick yesterday, remember? Caroline squeezed Jared's hand, and he felt a surge of pride. These quiet moments meant everything to him now. The simple act of helping with homework, sharing meals together, or fixing things around the house had become sacred rituals that healed his troubled soul. You're good with him, Caroline whispered, her head resting on his shoulder. Better than I ever expected. Jared pulled her closer, remembering how far they'd come. The fear in her eyes when they first met had been replaced by trust and love. His own demons, the darkness that once consumed him, seemed to retreat further with each passing day. It's easy, he said softly. You two make it easy. Caroline sat up, looking at him with knowing eyes. Nothing about this has been easy, Jared. You chose to stay, to fight for us, to change. That takes real strength. Her words touched something deep inside him. He thought about his old life, the violence and chaos that once defined him. Now, his strength showed in gentler ways, in patience, in love, in the daily choice to be better than he was yesterday. Ethan closed his math book with a triumphant smile. Done! He bounced up from the floor and climbed onto the couch between them. Can we watch a movie now? One movie, Caroline agreed. Then bed. As they settled in to watch, Jared couldn't help but marvel at how natural this felt. The weight of Ethan against his side, Caroline's hand in his, the simple joy of being together. His gaze drifted to the window where his motorcycle stood in the driveway, no longer a symbol of escape, but of coming home. During a quiet moment in the movie, Ethan looked up at Jared with those earnest blue eyes that had first drawn him in that day in the park. I'm glad you stayed, he said simply. The other kids at school were scared of you at first, but I told them you were different. I told them you were special. Jared swallowed hard, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Caroline watched them both, her eyes glistening. And you know what? Ethan continued, his small face serious. You're the best daddy ever. The words hit Jared like a physical force, filling his chest with warmth. In that moment, he understood completely what his journey had been about. Not just redemption or change, but love. Pure and simple. The kind of love that transforms, that heals, that makes a man worthy of a child's trust. He pulled Ethan closer, too moved to speak. Everything he'd been through, every battle fought and demon faced, had led him here. To this family. To this moment. To being someone's daddy. The town square buzzed with excitement as families gathered for the annual summer festival. Colorful banners swayed in the warm breeze, and the scent of cotton candy and popcorn filled the air. Jared stood tall beside Carolyn, his hand gently resting on Ethan's shoulder as they watched the mayor take the stage. "Never thought I'd be at one of these," Jared whispered to Caroline, adjusting the collar of his clean button-down shirt. It felt strange, being here in normal clothes instead of his old leather jacket. The tattoos on his arms were still visible, but they seemed different now, like old stories from a book he'd finished reading. Caroline squeezed his hand. "Things change," she said with a soft smile. "You changed." Ethan bounced on his toes, waving at his friends from school. "Look, Dad, Tommy's over there with his family." The word "dad" still made Jared's heart skip a beat. He watched as several parents who used to cross the street when they saw him coming now nodded in friendly greeting. Mrs. Peterson, who ran the local bakery, even gave him a warm smile. The mayor's voice boomed over the speakers, announcing the start of the Community Service Awards. Jared shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to being in crowds without feeling the need to watch his back. But here, with his family, he felt different. Safe. "And now," the mayor continued, "I'd like to recognize someone who has shown us that second chances are real. Through his work at the youth center and his dedication to our community, he's proven that it's never too late to start over." Jared froze. Caroline beamed up at him, and he realized she'd known about this all along. His work teaching mechanics to troubled teens at the center had started as community service, but it had become so much more. "Mr. Jared Sullivan, would you please come up?" Ethan pushed him forward excitedly. "Go on, Dad, that's you!" As Jared walked toward the stage, he caught his reflection in a store window. Gone was the hardened biker who'd rolled into town that Sunday morning. In his place stood a man with clear eyes and steady hands, a man who had found his purpose. The mayor handed him a small plaque, but Jared barely noticed it. His eyes were fixed on Caroline and Ethan in the crowd. Caroline wiped away happy tears while Ethan jumped up and down, proud as could be. Back with his family, Ethan hugged him tight. "See, I told you that you were special." Caroline touched his cheek softly. "You did more than change yourself, Jared. You showed others it was possible, too." Jared looked at the plaque in his hands, then at his family. The old life, the violence, the darkness, it all seemed like a distant memory now. Here, in this moment, he understood what true strength meant. It wasn't about being tough or feared. It was about having the courage to love, to be vulnerable, to let others in. He watched Ethan run off to play with his friends, saw the trust in Caroline's eyes, and felt the weight of his new role settle comfortably on his shoulders. The man who'd once lived for the thrill of danger now found his greatest joy in the simple moments of family life. This was his redemption, not in grand gestures or dramatic changes, but in the quiet dignity of being someone his family could count on. The old Jax was gone, and in his place stood Jared, a man who had finally found his way home. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the freshly painted walls. Jared stood at the counter, brewing coffee and watching Caroline pack Ethan's lunch for school. The simple domesticity of the moment still amazed him. How natural it felt now, How right. Don't forget I've got that parent-teacher conference today, Caroline reminded him, carefully wrapping Ethan's sandwich in wax paper. Already marked it in my calendar, Jared replied, pouring 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Caroline, their fingers brushing in a way that still sent sparks through him. The shop's slow today anyway. Mike can handle things while I'm gone. The local garage where he worked had become more than just a job. The owner had even started talking about making Jared a partner, seeing how he'd brought in new customers and earned their trust. It was strange, being respected for honest work instead of feared for his reputation. Ethan bounded down the stairs, his backpack bouncing. Mom! Dad! Did you sign my permission slip for the field trip? Right here, buddy. Jared pulled the signed form from his wallet. He'd read every word of it twice. Something his old self would have laughed at. But being a father meant caring about these details, about making sure everything was just right. Caroline smiled as she watched them, her eyes bright with happiness. The dark circles that had once haunted her face were gone, replaced by a healthy glow. Her medical treatments had worked wonders, but Jared knew it was more than that. She'd found peace, too, letting go of the burden of doing everything alone. We should invite the Hendersons over for dinner this weekend, Caroline suggested, straightening Ethan's collar. Sarah's been asking about your famous grilled chicken. Jared nodded, still amazed that he now had neighbors who actually wanted to spend time with him. The same people who had once crossed the street to avoid him now stopped by to chat about recipes and home repairs. After dropping Ethan at school, Jared and Caroline walked hand in hand back to their house. The spring air was crisp, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from their newly planted garden. The house itself stood proud now, its fresh paint and fixed shutters a testament to their hard work. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, Jared admitted, pulling Caroline close. That I get to have this life, this family. Caroline leaned into him, her presence solid and reassuring. You earned it, Jared, every bit of it. Inside, Jared looked around at the living room, where family photos now covered the walls. There was Ethan's last birthday party, Caroline's first day back at work, and countless moments of their life together. Each picture told a story of healing, of growth, of love. You know what? Caroline said, wrapping her arms around his waist. We should have a special dinner tonight. Just the 3 of us. Ethan's been asking for your spaghetti and meatballs. His favorite, Jared chuckled. He kissed her forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. I'll pick up the ingredients after the parent-teacher conference. They stood there for a moment, holding each other in the quiet morning light. Through the window they could see their garden, the swing set Jared had built for Ethan, and the peaceful neighborhood beyond. This was home, not just the building, but the life they'd built together. Later that evening, the kitchen filled with the aroma of garlic and tomatoes as Jared stirred the sauce. Caroline set the table, while Ethan chattered about his day at school. The sound of their laughter mixed with the clinking of plates and the soft music playing from the radio. The late afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink as Jared and Caroline stood in their front yard. Their fingers intertwined naturally, a gesture that had become as familiar as breathing. The fresh-cut grass beneath their feet released its sweet scent into the air, mixing with the fragrance of Caroline's rose garden. Jared squeezed Caroline's hand gently, taking in the sight before him. The house they'd worked so hard to restore gleamed with fresh paint, its windows sparkling in the golden light. The porch swing he'd built swayed gently in the breeze, and Ethan's bicycle leaned against the steps, testament to the ordinary joy of family life. Remember when you first came here? Caroline asked, her voice soft with memory. The house was falling apart, and And you were too stubborn to accept help, Jared finished, a warm smile crossing his face. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Guess some things don't change." Caroline laughed, the sound light and free. "I've gotten better at it. Besides, you were just as stubborn, thinking you didn't deserve any of this." Jared's gaze swept over their yard, taking in the flower beds they'd planted together, the treehouse he'd built for Ethan, and the small vegetable garden that was beginning to sprout. Each element represented hours of work, conversations, and shared dreams. His old life felt like a distant memory now, replaced by something far more precious. "Dad! Mom!" Ethan's voice rang out as he bounded down the porch steps, homework completed, and ready for their evening together. "Can we have dinner outside tonight? Please?" Jared ruffled Ethan's hair as the boy wrapped his arms around both their waists in a group hug. "Sure thing, buddy. Want to help me get the picnic table ready?" They worked together, spreading a checkered tablecloth over the wooden table Jared had crafted himself. Caroline brought out plates of food, while Ethan carefully arranged the silverware, proud to help. The simple task of setting up dinner felt sacred somehow, a ritual that bound them together. As they settled around the table, the setting sun cast long shadows across their yard. Jared watched as Caroline helped Ethan cut his chicken, the way she knew exactly how he liked his vegetables arranged, the gentle patience in her movements. He saw how Ethan's eyes lit up when telling them about his day at school, the trust and love shining in his face. The moment felt perfect, not because everything was flawless, but because it was real. The challenges they'd faced, the obstacles they'd overcome, had only made their bond stronger. Jared knew with absolute certainty that this was where he belonged. After dinner, they sat together on the porch steps, Ethan between them, pointing out the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Carolyn leaned her head against Jared's shoulder, and he could feel the contentment radiating from her. Ethan's excited chatter about constellations filled the peaceful evening air. This was their life now, simple, honest, and filled with love. The tough exterior Jared had worn for so long had melted away, replaced by the warmth of being a husband and father. Carolyn's initial wariness had transformed into deep trust and affection. And Ethan, their precious son, flourished in the security of their love. Looking at his family, Jared felt a profound sense of peace. The life they shared wasn't just about second chances or redemption anymore. It was about the joy of each day they spent together, the countless small moments that made up their happiness. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.